While it's easy to rag on, I imagine trying to create a WWE superstar that lasts is really hard. Think how many people you have to appease. There's people like us, kids, casual fans, men, women, maybe a llama watches pro wrestling, I don't know. But if it does, damn it, you've got to cater for that as well. There's so many variables, and trying to get one that ticks all the boxes is harder than maths. We all know that maths is really hard. This is why when the stars are aligning, it's probably best to take a punt and hope it works out. Otherwise you may miss the boat entirely and you can have a bunch of wrestling fans on your back making a fuss. I'm Simon from What Culture, and this is 10 times WWE missed opportunities to create lasting main event stars. Number 10. Crush vs Randy Savage. Pro wrestling is usually a pretty big supporter of having talent lose when they're on their way out, and Vince McMahon is no different on the whole. Hogan lost in 93, Bret in 97, Austin in 2003, Michaels in 2010, and even The Undertaker in 2014. Sure, he kept on going, but the decision to end his streak was probably made because there was a chance he was done. This was why it was a bit odd when Randy Savage beat Crush at WrestleMania 10. WWE was already shifting the Macho Man away from the ring, so why the Tool Dude, who you imagine those backstage loved, wasn't given the W here is a mystery. I mean, he sucked, don't get me wrong, but when has that ever stopped anyone in the WWE from not pushing someone that has favourable proportions? Here, Savage took the victory even though the opposite decision may have made Crush a main event level heel, or at least given him a shot. Instead, you got nothing. Number 9. Earthquake vs Hulk Hogan. At SummerSlam 1990, WWE could have decided to make Earthquake a massive heel and a proper superstar. He had some momentum, he just needed that push. Problem was, he was never going to get that rub from Hogan. Of course not. Hogan wouldn't have put himself over in the early 90s, it was just the way of things. All the tools were in place too. Earthquake had a rep for almost putting the Immortal One on the shelf for good in 1990, including multiple Earthquake splashes on the Brother Love show. He was shown to be a credible threat. He had the size, he had the story, and it all went splat. Hogan took him to the cleaners and Earthquake just looked like another guy that tried to get in the way and failed. And that was that for him. He had a good career, who knows what may have been. Number 8. Razor Ramon vs Bret Hart. We all know that Razor Ramon was damn good. He had a good gimmick in an era where that meant everything, and he could go in the ring. There was no reason he couldn't have made it and stayed on top. But in terms of his early 90s WWE run, it never really happened. While he had some great feuds with the likes of the Ultimate Warrior, Mr. Perfect and Randy Savage, it was when he came up against Bret Hart at the Royal Rumble 1993 where a tipping point was first presented. Bret was the champ, and if Razor could steal the win, well, he'd be flung out of the mid-card onto the main stage. Instead, Hart made him tap out with the sharpshooter, which would have been fine if WWE hadn't then given up on him too only 2 months later. So this served nobody. Ramon went on to wrestle Bob Backlund and we never saw him in the same light again. No wonder he went to WCW. Number 7. Bam Bam Bigelow vs Lawrence Taylor. I've always thought if I became well famous and then received an invite from the WWE to participate in a match, I would put whoever Vince McMahon shoved in my face over like Rover. Why wouldn't you? Well, the answer is that no one of any celebrity ever does. It's always really sad. One of the most high-profile cases of this was the WrestleMania 11 main event where Bam Bam Bigelow did go head-to-head with NFL football great Lawrence Taylor. It was awesome for the company as they received a ton of mainstream media attention, but the end result was Bigelow, who had some serious momentum at the time, losing to some non-wrestling schmo. It basically killed his career in WWE in many ways and ended any hopes of him being a top star. There were attempts to rebuild him as a babyface, but they didn't work. He couldn't even beat a football player. For shame. Number 6. Ted DiBiase vs Randy Savage. You can kinda argue this one either way. The main event for WrestleMania 4 saw Randy Savage beat Ted DiBiase in the finals of the 14-man tournament to win the WWE Championship. It cemented him as a star, and ultimately was as close as the $1 Million Man ever got. Originally, however, he was meant to win. If that had happened, who knows how his career would have gone. DiBiase still did incredibly well for himself and is considered a legend, but winning the title, especially back then, would have changed everything. He started to slip down the card after this and never really went back the other way. It could have all have been so different. Number 5. Lex Luger vs YOKOZUNA. Lex Luger did beat YOKOZUNA at SummerSlam 93, but he did so via countout. Now you can look at this two ways. The first is that he should have slayed the beast, won the title and cemented his place as the new Hulk Hogan, which is exactly what WWE was trying to achieve. The second was he wasn't the right guy, fans weren't buying it, so doubling down and doing it anyway probably would have been a huge mistake. Vince McMahon had done everything including giving him a bus, so thinking a proper victory here would have changed much is wishful thinking. But it may have worked in his favour, especially as after this it was all downhill. Luger lost at WrestleMania, and by that point, forget about it. Everyone cared even less than they did before. Number 4, Vader versus Shawn Michaels. It's no secret that Vader's WWE run wasn't great. Never presented in the same way as he had been in WCW and Japan, just fell a bit flat. A large reason for this was not getting the wins he needed. Despite having a decent start and getting into the championship picture, he hit a wall at SummerSlam 1996 when he came face to face with HBK. Told he was going to beat Shawn Michaels for the gold, this would be Vader's time and a great reason to once again prove that the Mastodon was a player. That idea didn't sit too well with Michaels though. In fact, didn't sit well with him at all. Going out of his way to get the finish changed, the Heartbreak Kid pinned Vader after hitting a moonsault. If that wasn't bad enough, Shawn kept dropping character throughout the match, seemingly upset with Vader's performance. None of this helped the big man's image as a monster, and every other planned title run never materialised. Within months he'd gone from a top-level heel to, in his own words, a fat piece of shit, and that was it. He was mid-card bound forever. Number 3, Wade Barrett versus Randy Orton. The Nexus, especially their introduction, had the wrestling world talking. A bunch of rookies bombarding their way onto the main roster and beating up all the top guys. Not a bad way to get some new faces noticed. The culmination of this, or at least one aspect, was a WWE Championship match at Survivor Series 2010 where leader Wade Barrett met Randy Orton. If the former could have beaten the latter, it would have utterly made him, not least because Barrett would have been able to shout proudly that he was the first ever English-born WWE World title holder. But as we know, that didn't happen and the status quo remained. Orton stood tall, Barrett's chance to be a top heel hit a snag, and he never got that spot back. It was even more of a shame because WWE pulled the trigger with The Miz the next night on Raw. You'll never know what could have been. Number 2, Ryback versus CM Punk. Regardless what you think of him today, there was a point in time where Ryback was very popular. Debuting after WrestleMania 28, he was granted a mega push, which even included an undefeated streak a la Goldberg. To say there were obvious comparisons would have been an understatement. But it worked, and you could tell each and every week that his fan base and level of support grew. As such, Ryback found himself in the championship match at Hell in a Cell 2012, facing off against his now best mate CM Punk. While it certainly was a bit too early, there was a great argument that WWE could have crowned Ryback at this juncture, underlining the potential they thought he had. Otherwise, he may as well have just been another guy. It was a rare opportunity that mostly came up through happenstance. To throw that away would have been silly. And it was silly because Ryback lost and within a few months had fallen by the wayside quite severely. And now look, he's not even with the company. How sad. Number 1, CM Punk versus John Cena. CM Punk's rise to superstardom was as electric as it was entertaining. Taking 2011 and just making it his own, Punk was edgy, different, felt real. It was wonderfully refreshing, and his win against John Cena at Money in the Bank is more than worthy of its 5-star Wrestling Observer rating. The aftermath of this, though, was ridiculous. Despite going with the story that Punk's contract had expired and he was off with his belt, he returned to TV 2 weeks later. It was far too soon, and had he been missing for months, his return would have been otherworldly. It was done, however, to have a main event for that year's SummerSlam. While Punk was given the nod over Cena once again, what happened afterwards was just bizarre. Kevin Nash appeared from nowhere and powerbombed him, which led to Alberto Del Rio coming out and cashing in his Money in the Bank. Keeping Punk super strong through this period could have made him even more of a star than he already was. All this hoopla just made it seem like the company didn't actually give a damn. Maybe they didn't.
So that was our video. Thank you for watching. Please do feel free to click on anything happening around my head or something terrible might happen to this dog. Is that you too sweeting me, bro? Ugh. Disgusting. That's really bad.